each other's vulnerabilities, our fragilities, our shortcomings, and each of us desiring to actually flourish and be in this world. It extends to humans, and we can extend it to our fellow creatures, and we do it in 100 different ways every day.
But it gets back to the question I asked earlier. Can you teach empathy? And some think, of course you can. You say get into the schools and you can foster it, you can inculcate, but at the same time, there's almost a kind of mechanism that's involved. Some people seem to have it and some don't.
Well, I'll give you an example. In the Empathic Civilization, I take a long look through history at parenting behavior and marriages and parenting styles that have changed. It changes dramatically. I'll give you an example. 100 years ago, if your little child took someone else's little child's toy, your little toddler, took it away, and the other little child started crying, what would mom and dad do to the child? They'd whack him. Or they'd say bad, and they'd shame the child. All right? Shaming cultures do not promulgate empathy because they squelch the human spirit. If you shame a baby and say you're unworthy, you don't measure up, the aggression and violence comes out with a vengeance. Now,
boy, excuse me, I've got to put a plug in here for a movie I just saw last night called White Ribbon. Do you know about this movie? It's all about Germany before First World War and about how authoritarian and how much abuse there was.
Absolutely.
And all of that. It was made by a German filmmaker, and what he's really trying to show is this is a culture full of shame. And
absolutely.
And it was able to breed, essentially, Nazism.
Absolutely. And in my book, if you look at the dedication of the book, I dedicate the book to my wife, and I dedicate the book to January 27th, 1945. That was the 12 hours after my twin sister and I were born. That's when Auschwitz and Birkenau was liberated. And the dedication is to all those who survived, all those who perished, and those yet to come. Because I do think that the parenting style was quite important, the Prussian parenting style, to the aggressive, violent behavior in that society. But what does a parent do today to show you how empathy evolves? Remember I said in history we have various forms of consciousness that go with energy communication revolutions. Hunter-gatherer societies, their consciousness is mythological. You go to the great religious theological societies, the hydraulic agricultural civilization, all based on the great religions. When you go to the 19th century, ideological consciousness, first industrial revolution. 20th century, psychological consciousness. The electricity communication revolution ushered in psychological ways of thinking. So today, we think differently than our grandparents. If grandma were, say, at a Thanksgiving dinner and breaks a glass, passive-aggressive behavior, and you say to grandma, wait a minute, you broke that glass, you're acting out, there's some transference here, is there something about your childhood that you just reminisced about? Grandma doesn't have a clue. Today, we think therapeutically, so when a mother or father is with a little toddler today, and that toddler takes another toddler's toy, and the other toddler starts to cry, mom and dad takes their kid aside and say, Johnny, look at Billy crying. How would you feel if Billy did that to you? Now go over to Billy. So then the little toddler goes over and sees Billy's crying, and then the toddler starts crying, and the parent says, well, perhaps give him a toy or kiss him. They're teaching him guilt, but what they're saying to that child is not shame. We trust your humanity if we can, and the parent's the first analyst, the first therapist. We trust your humanity. If we can put you in the right script here, we can help you understand how to channel your biological drive for empathic distress so you understand through this story how to mature empathy. That's an evolution in empathy. You didn't have that 200 years ago. You had corporal punishment.
Yeah, there's a scene in this film, in fact, that I just alluded to, The White Ribbon, where these kids are making whistles out of twigs, and one makes a whistle, the son of the Baron in the movie, in fact, makes a whistle that's working very well, and the other kid is so angry because he's not making a whistle like that, he throws him in the water and really almost tries to drown him. But let me get our callers in here and get them involved, and we'll go first to Lisa. Good morning.
Thank you. I love your message, and I have a question. I think there's a lot of people already whose consciousness is quite empathic and quite involved, but I feel like we are often thwarted by powerful economic interests, insurance companies in the healthcare fight, oil companies fighting against climate targets. You mentioned changing our institutions, our political institutions, our corporations. How do we do that?
I think that we begin to talk with each other and we create a global conversation. Human beings, we live by narrative. We live by storytelling. We're the only creature, and all creatures communicate, and mammals are social, and many have crude cultures, and they even have empathic response. We're the only ones that use language to tell stories. We live
don't
by
quite know about dolphins entirely.
Well, we don't know. They may. But we live by our stories, and we've got a bad story out there. It doesn't fit the 21st century. Our story about being self-interested, libido-driven, pleasure-seeking utilitarians fit the frontier period of colonization. in the market era and nation-state era. But now we've got 6.8 billion people that have to live together and try to create a sustainable economy and deal with climate change. I think we need a new conversation. What heartens me is the scientists are actually discovering what we probably should have already known, that we are wired for this empathic distress. I think we need that discussion in every form. I think we need it in the family. We need it in our schools. We need it in our business institutions. We need it in our civil society groups. And if we can have a robust global discussion on how we move from geopolitics to biosphere politics, how we actually explore our core nature as Homo empathicus, then we're going to be able to prepare an empathic civilization. Right now, we can't, because the whole way the government operates and business operates is based on these old ideas about human nature, and they become self-fulfilling. If we think we're nasty, brutish, and self-interested, we'll create institutions that reflect it, and then we become what we are, but we lose our core nature. Our core nature is to be social. Let me.
This is an intelligent level of conversation, though, and you think about. I think about some people who are so involved in, say, the tabloid culture and really almost like non-thinking organisms. I'm not being elitist here. I'm just talking, I think, reality, because we understand that there are people out there who are just pleasure-seeking and don't care about anything else.
Well, let's go to the deathbed test. This is, my wife says, the deathbed test for everybody, regardless of whether you're a thinking person or not. When people are on their deathbed, or when they're old and gray and looking back at life, no one looks back at life for the moments where they were able to pursue their material self-interest, become more autonomous, seek their pleasure, or find some utilitarian act to be engaged in. When you look back at a life on the deathbed, the photographs in one's memory are the empathic moments. They always are, where one is able to transcend and actually experience and feel another's existential plight and root for them and celebrate them, because that's when we transcend ourselves. We feel pretty super alive in those moments. Those are the photographs we etch in our memories. And I think so we know what our core nature is at the end of life. We now know that the beginning of life, that's our core nature. The problem is we've got to fill in from birth to death and create an institutional environment that creates an empathic civilization. It's a tough thing. I'm going to say to everyone listening out there, I think the jury's out. I don't even know if we can do this. But I don't know if there's a plan B. If we can't